Trump's awkward arrival at G7 summit. President poses with world leaders after saying Putin should have been with them, then keeps talking while Trudeau tries to end a photo op after flaming Macron in Canada over trade barriers. President Donald Trump arrived at the G7 summit in Canada after throwing another bomb on his way there, saying Russia should be allowed back into the group of industrial nations for talks, then talked over the Canadian Prime Minister to say there would be a joint statement. Trump posed for a brief photo op with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau Friday afternoon. "Thank you very much," Trump said, is what is often really an invitation for reporters to ask him a question. When a reporter tried to ask whether Trump and Trudeau, who have been feuding over trade, would issue a joint statement, Trudeau tried to put a quick end to the event. "We'll see you guys," he said. But Trump immediately answered the question anyway. "I think we'll have a joint statement." Then Trudeau shut down any potential press conference after Trump threw barbs at a long morning impromptu event in Washington. "Merci tout le monde," he said, repeating the salutation twice as he thanked the group. Trump's unexpected announcement on Russia came after he and allies France and Canada have been engaged in an escalating trade war and rhetorical back and forth, and as a special counsel continues to probe Russian influence in the U.S. presidential election. Although he got a warm welcome from Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, a scheduled meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron got scratched at the outset. Aides were able to cobble together a meeting for later on Monday. "We've had really a very good relationship, very special," Trump said at first. "A lot of people wrote a couple of things that weren't quite true, a little bit accurate, perhaps. We've had a little test every once in a while when it comes to trade," the president then acknowledged. Then Trump both complained about EU trade and complimented his counterpart. "The United States has had a very big trade deficit for many years with the European Union and we are working it out and Emmanuel's been very helpful in that regard," Trump said. "And something's going to happen. I think it will be very positive." A family photo saw Trump greet other leaders apparently warmly, although the start of official business at a round-table session saw Trump photographed looking less than happy. Trump arrived in Malbaie, Charlevoix, Quebec, late, having given reporters an extended unscheduled briefing on the South Lawn of the White House. In contrast to most of the leaders, Trump went solo, saying that the First Lady, Melania Trump, has been told by doctors not to fly after a 4-hour operation, which was far more serious than previously reported. The world leaders had a lunch of locally sourced food, a far cry from Trump's preferred burgers, and posed for a family photo overlooking the St. Lawrence River. Russia continues to remain under U.S. and European sanctions for its annexation and incursion into part of Ukraine. Russia got kicked out of the group after it annexed Crimea. "They should let Russia come back and because we should have Russia at the negotiating table," Trump said before boarding Marine One. "Why are we having a meeting without Russia being in the meeting?" Trump asked. "They threw Russia out. They should let Russia come back in." Trump described himself as Russia's worst nightmare, even as he made the pitch for their inclusion. The country was removed from what had been the G8 over its annexation of Crimea from Ukraine in 2014. "Russia should be in this meeting. Why are we having a meeting without Russia being in the meeting?" he asked. Trump's planned bilateral meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron was already expected to be a source for fireworks, after Trump slapped steel and aluminum tariffs on European allies, and Macron said the G7 could work without the U.S. if it must. The White House told reporters it was working to reschedule the Macron meeting after it suddenly fell off the schedule. Instead, Trump only briefly greeted Macron and the French First Lady on a terrace at the summit. Trump cast his opinion on Russia in pragmatic terms, though he said it was up to the group. "I would recommend, and it's up to them, but Russia should be in the meeting. It should be a part of it," he said. "You know, whether you like it or not, and it may not be politically correct, but we have the world to run," Trump told reporters in extended remarks before his trip. And in the G7, which used to be the G8, they threw Russia out. "They should let Russia come back in," the president said. It is just the latest in a series of times the president has sought to bolster ties with the Kremlin, including resisting a sanctions bill pushed by Congress that he ultimately signed, calling for warmer relations with Moscow, and restating Russian President Vladimir Putin's denials of election interference after a one-on-one meeting. Trump's bold pronouncement came after he already has been engaged in angry back-and-forth with traditional allies France and Canada in a trade war. The Trump administration slapped tariffs on steel and aluminum imported from the Allies, citing a national security exception. The Canadian Prime Minister blasted back, mentioning Canada's military contributions in Afghanistan, while French President Emmanuel Macron said Thursday the remaining 6 G6 nations could operate without U.S. leadership. Russia didn't jump at the offer Trump extended in remarks to reporters. Russia is focused on other formats, apart from the G7, Kremlin spokesman said, according to state-sponsored Sputnik media. The U.S. and other leading industrial nations kicked Russia out of the G8 in 2014, after its invasion of Ukraine and seizing of Crimea. International law prohibits the acquisition of part or all of another state's territory through coercion or force, according to a joint statement at the time. To do so violates the principles upon which the international system is built. We condemn the illegal referendum held in Crimea in violation of Ukraine's constitution. The statement continued, we also strongly condemn Russia's illegal attempt to annex Crimea in contravention of international law and specific international obligations. Other leaders of the G7 are set to clash with Trump when they pressure him to lift sanctions on steel and aluminum they fear could lead to a trade war. Trump is scheduled to leave early on Saturday for Singapore to prepare for a summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on Tuesday. Trump is planning to leave the G7 summit early, skipping the climate discussions, following a furious Twitter spat with French President Emmanuel Macron. Trump also attacked Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, labeling him as indignant and accusing him of damaging U.S. agriculture, while complaining that both he and President Macron are charging the U.S. massive tariffs. Macron fired back on Twitter that the summit did not need the U.S. The American president may not mind being isolated, but neither do we mind signing a 6-country agreement if need be, he wrote. Because these 6 countries represent values, they represent an economic market which has the weight of history behind it and which is now a true international force. Now Trump, who will meet with both Macron and Trudeau tomorrow, has announced he plans to leave the summit several hours early. The White House confirmed that he will depart mid-morning on Saturday, skipping the sessions on climate change and the environment. A White House aide will take his place. Trump reportedly even considered scrapping the visit to Canada entirely because he'd be outnumbered on issues like trade and climate change, sources told CNN. The U.S. president was also unhappy over Trudeau's barbs about Canada's better relationship with the U.S. under Barack Obama. Prime Minister Trudeau is being so indignant, bringing up the relationship that the U.S. and Canada had over the many years and all sorts of other things. But he doesn't bring up the fact that they charge us up to 300% on dairy, hurting our farmers, killing our agriculture. Trump tweeted Thursday. The tweet followed another, where he wrote that, the EU trade surplus with the US is $151 billion, and Canada keeps our farmers and others out. He concluded his message by writing, look forward to seeing them tomorrow. The summit starts Friday in Canada. Trump will come face-to-face at the gathering in Charlevoix, Quebec, with world leaders whose views do not line with his on a range of issues from trade to the environment as well as Iran and the construction of a new U.S. embassy in Jerusalem. And his tweet sets a confrontational tone going into the gathering. Macron has already arrived in Canada where he and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau warned Trump his actions had put his people's jobs on the line. The Canadian premier encouraged Trump to reconsider his decision to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. American jobs are on the line because of his actions and because of his administration, Trudeau said on Parliament Hill in Ontario. When we can underscore this, and we see that there's a lot of pressure within the U.S., perhaps he will revise his position. Macron, who arrived in Ottawa on Wednesday evening for talks in advance of the summit, agreed. "A trade war doesn't spare anyone," he said. Macron and Trump have had a close relationship. Trump hosted the French president and his wife for his first official state dinner. But relations have reportedly become tense since Trump made his decision to raise steel and aluminum tariffs on Mexico, Canada and the European Union. Friday's G7 meeting is expected to be tense as Trump takes one-on-one time with Macron, Trudeau, and British Prime Minister Theresa May. The president may find more success at his June 12 summit in Singapore with North Korean President Kim Jong-un. It seems likely that Trump will enjoy a warmer encounter with the autocrat from Pyongyang than with his Canadian hosts and European and Japanese allies. Leaders like Trudeau and Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel admit it will be difficult to even agree on a joint communiqué at the two-day meeting. The flames have already been thrown. And Tommy Vietor, who served as President Obama's national security spokesperson, retweeted Trump's throwdown with these words, "There's just no reason to be an insufferable prick to our closest allies." Trump fumed at Trudeau during a contentious phone call on the administration's new tariff policy, attacking Canada for burning down the White House, a feat performed by British troops in the War of 1812. Canada didn't exist for another 55 years, until 1867 when the colonies of Canada, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia came together to form the nation. Yet, Trump reportedly quipped to Trudeau during a call, "Didn't you guys burn down the White House?" Trudeau had been pressing Trump on how he could justify the new steel and aluminum tariffs as a national security issue, CNN reported. In response, Trump brought up the War of 1812 when British troops burned down the presidential residence on August 24, 1814. They also looted and set the U.S. Capitol building aflame. Trudeau has vocally slammed Trump's reasoning for his new steel and aluminum tariff policies, saying it is insulting and unacceptable to say Canada is a threat to the United States. "The idea that we are somehow a national security threat to the United States is quite frankly insulting and unacceptable," he said on NBC's Meet the Press on Sunday. Trump last week allowed Canada and the European Union's exemptions from steel and aluminum tariffs he introduced this spring to expire, which resulted in the U.S. imposing tariffs of 25% and 10%, respectively, on steel and aluminum imports from Canada, Mexico and the European Union. Trump strummed the tune Wednesday that the U.S. has the worst trade deals ever made, that his administration is scrapping for ones that are really fantastic. "And we're going to have now fair trade deals. We have made the worst deals ever made. NAFTA is a disaster," he said, referring to the existing deal between the U.S., Mexico and Canada. "World Trade Organization is a disaster. I could go deal after deal, and it's been very unfair to our country, to our workers, to our companies, and to everybody else involved. And we're changing them around rapidly." The U.S. has a $8.4 billion trade surplus in goods and services with Canada, according to a report from the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. But looking at trade in goods alone, Canada has a surplus of $17.5 billion last year, according to the same USTR report.